Hello and welcome to the CodeMe event channel and the CodeMe event meetup group. My name is Gabor Sabo. I personally usually teach Rust and Python to companies and help companies to start using these languages. And I have this meetup group where I usually organize presentations about Rust and Python, but this time it's going to be about JavaScript. I'm really happy that Eyal agreed to give this presentation, and all the people who joined us in this meeting. Feel free to ask questions. Just remember that we are putting it on YouTube, so you can ask in chat if you don't want to be on YouTube. And if you are watching this video on YouTube, then please like the video and follow the channel and join us in our meeting group. So in our meetup group, so you'll be able to join in one of our upcoming meetings. With that said, Eyal, it's your turn to introduce yourself and take over the screen.
Okay, so hi everybody, my name is Eyal. I am a full stack developer with 25 years of experience, lots of experience in doing web GUI. That's actually where I come from. That's why I have passion for JavaScript. I started as a web developer, web designer, building websites when I was a teenager in the late 90s. And that's how I got into the field. So I always loved JavaScript, and I loved the flexibility of it, the freeformness of it. And I'll start with a little bit introduction, so you'll see why I developed Vanilla Boot. When everybody started moving into JavaScript frameworks, I was a little bit suspicious about it because I like vanilla JavaScript. I don't like to be constrained, limited, and I felt that this is what the frameworks bring. I had a few years experience working with Angular in its earliest versions, version 1 and version 2. And so anybody that has experience with Angular is going to be like, of course you didn't like it. It was version 1 and 2. It was horrible. But now we're in version, I don't know, 18 or something. So it's completely different. And 5 years ago, I had my first experience developing a mobile application with React.js. And since then, I developed 3 more applications with React.js. And I reached a point that I cannot handle it anymore. I said, I'm not going to develop with React anymore. And I switched a few projects back to vanilla JavaScript. Mind that some of my criticism of React is not relevant anymore because it did improve over time. But I'm going to present a project today that's going to enable you to keep using vanilla JavaScript to develop applications with components just like you would if you would use React or Angular, but without the limitations. So let me just share the screen and start the presentation. Okay. So you must see you should see my desktop now, right?
Yes, we see your whole desktop, I think.
Oh, that's the Vanilla Boot website. That's my project, but let me just start the presentation. There it is. So Vanilla Boot, it's a minimal framework with maximum control, pure JavaScript, pure freedom. That's the tagline. It's a lightweight JavaScript utility designed to streamline front-end development without relying on extensive frameworks. When I say extensive frameworks, I mean Angular, React, Vue, you name them. It enables developer to build application with reusable UI components using standard JavaScript and HTML, preserving the flexibility and simplicity of native web technologies. So when I ask people, why do you use frameworks? Because I don't get it. Like for me, I can do anything with vanilla JavaScript with ease, with extreme ease. For me, it's not clear why people use frameworks. I can make a guess, but I asked people who do push for frameworks, for people who I worked with, people who are interviewed, ask them, why do you use frameworks? And these are the 8 most popular answers that I got. The first one is the fear of the freeformness of the JavaScript. So with JavaScript, you can write many parts of code and there's no form to it. There's no beginning and end. There's no structure. There's no tree-like structure for the code. And for someone who's managing a project and is going to give a lot of freedom to developers to just build it any way they want, it is somewhat scary, you know. You don't know where they're going to take it. And with the framework, it kind of like binds you to staying with a certain structure. The second thing is you want to build modular reusable UI components. And most people don't know how to do it with JavaScript. And while it's very trivial and how should I say it? It's very straightforward to build UI components with framework. And then there's the virtual DOM, which means efficient updates and rendering. State management, people say, whoa, the framework gives me state management and it can handle more complex applications easily. It's easy when it's they would say vanilla is good for small things, but when you have a complex app, I want state management and all that stuff. Built-in reactivity, how to update UI on data change. You change the object and the form reflects the change to the data. And then there's the routing and navigation of the web app on the client side. And people would say there's a rich ecosystem, there's a lot of support for it, there's plugins, extensions, add-ons, and tools, blah, blah, and cross-platform support. So people don't want to be like the old days where they have to test everything that they develop on different browsers and different operating systems. And the frameworks, it's one of the things that they promise. Now, you might laugh when I switch to the second page. The first 2 reasons are the actual reasons people opt to use frameworks like React and Angular. Well, the number 1 reason is they're afraid of the freedom that JavaScript in the browser brings with it. And second, they don't know how to build modular reusable UI components without a framework. Then there's the virtual DOM thing that I think that nobody really, like 99% of the people who I talk to, actually 100% of the people I worked with, projects I worked with, it wasn't relevant. State management, not easy at all. Was never easy. Maybe it's easier today, but certainly in the previous years, it was hell with frameworks. Rich ecosystem. If you look at libraries, popular, mature libraries, things like AG-Grid, for example, that gives you the most sophisticated grid for web that you can put in your website or web apps. You can get it for Angular, for React, for Vue, for any kind of framework, and also for vanilla. So I think that the vast majority of libraries, certainly the most important ones, are available also for vanilla JavaScript. So you don't need to use a framework in order to have those libraries. So let's talk about the state, the complicated world of state. If you want to actually, you have to use this mechanism of state when you use React, and it's like a technology that you have to learn in order to do very simple things that I will soon show you how you can do them without React, and we will see what is more simple and what's less simple. So here we have basically a button that says add, and when you click it, it calls add value. And what it does, it increments value 2, and then it sets value 1 to the value of value 2. So when you read the code, you see that value 1 is initialized to 7, and we expect to have the display show us hello 7, and when you click, it's going to increment value 2. So it's going to be 4 is going to become 5, and then value 1 is going to get the value of value 2. So we expect to see 5. And then in a subsequent presses of the button, we expect to see 6, 7, 8, and so on. So we start with 7, and then we jump to 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. But this is not what actually happens. What actually is going to happen is that, second, here we have it. We have hello 7, which is the value of value 1. I click it once, it says hello 5, as expected. I click again, and it's 5, again, and it's 6, again, and it's 5, again, 5, again I click, it's 6, again I click it 5. What is happening? What is happening behind the scenes is that this function gets recalled again. Everything is restarting. So it's not working as we think it's going to work, and we actually have to learn what's happening behind the scenes or inside the black box. It's not the black box, it's open source, but no one is going to get into the source code of React. So we have to read a long document to understand how the use state works behind the scenes, and when does the app being called and when it's not, in order to build something as simple as a counter that increments an integer and prints it. So this code that I've made here, it's an example of a very common mistake. It has a name, the mistake. It's called reactive state mismanagement, or you can call it state initialization anti-pattern, or a stale state, an uncontrolled state mutation, or redundant state updates. So very complicated concepts in order to make something very simple. Now, this is how you would do it without React. If it's just HTML and standard native JavaScript. The HTML would say hello, and then there's a span, which is just an element containing anything you put in it, basically text, and we can access it by the ID, the ID of the span. Then there's new line and a button with title 2, and on click, there's an event handler, add 1. And the JavaScript would say this: we have value 1 initialized to 7 and value 2 initialized to 4. And on the loading of the page, we're going to get the element foo. By the way, do you see my mouse moving? No, right? Can you see my mouse?
I can see, and I'll have a question soon. Okay.
And then we set it to value 1, to 7. Now, when we click the button, we expect add 1 to be called, so we increment value 2. We say value 1 equals value 2, and the text content of foo shall be value 1. And let's see how it's actually working. So this is the JavaScript example. See, it's initialized to hello 7. We click, it becomes 5, click 6, clicks 7, click 8, and so on. So there's less room to make mistakes because there's no complicated 100 pages document to read about how to use state. You don't have state. You just set the variable and set the context, the content of the HTML element. So you don't need to learn.
I have a question because I'm not, I mean, I write JavaScript and stuff like this, but I'm definitely not an expert. Why do you use onClick? Is this that's what you recommend, or why not attach the event to the document, whatever?
Attach the event to the document. I mean, you can go and attach.
I mean, so you can write it in the HTML, the onClick, or you can write some JavaScript that will attach the click event to that DOM.
Like if the button would have an idea, I can tell get element by idea and then connect the event handler. That's fine. That's fine. You know, and that's the thing with vanilla JavaScript. You have many ways to make things, and people are afraid of it. Some people are afraid of it. I'm not afraid of it, but you do need to have some consistency in a large project. That's true. So the freeformness, the freeform nature of JavaScript in the browser is a good thing for some people and a bad thing for others. It's truly a matter of personal preference. But when you work with JavaScript vanilla, you don't need to study refs, function components. There used to be this thing called class components, and it's not deprecated, but it's not used anymore in React. This was causing a lot of those problems in the past. Higher order components, render props, custom hooks, mounting, updating, component trees, lifecycle, re-renders, use effect, use context, use state, all those concepts and basically all those pieces of technology that you would have to read many pages on each one of them to understand, just to make something as simple as a button click that updates the data on the document. So the way I see those frameworks is it's like if you know the Ruby Goldberg machine, the super complicated machine that eventually makes something very simple. So you have JSX, which is, it looks like HTML, but it really isn't HTML. You can't write anything that you put in HTML in it. And then it goes into the framework, and then you have a piece of code like React create element and a reference to my button and a different way of writing the properties. And the output, eventually, what the framework does, it translates to JavaScript. So you can write in JavaScript or have the framework create JavaScript for you. That's what happens behind the scenes. The framework does this thing. It creates a new element called button. It sets the style to blue. It sets the text to I'm a button, click me, and then document body, append child. So I say, why have all this big machine generate something as simple as this simple JavaScript? So let's talk about things that you can't do with frameworks, which is direct and synchronous DOM manipulations, inline scripts, work without a build system, like a bundler, like a Webpack, and I'm not even getting into TypeScript. Global event handling and delegation, accessing and modifying the full HTML structure, like the way it appears in the browser after it's rendered, and real-time dynamic script and style loading. I wouldn't know. Maybe you can do those things, but you probably have to study the framework really good. Like, it's not enough that you know how to do it in vanilla. You'll have to study the framework deeply in order to make things that are pretty trivial without the framework. And custom event creation and dispatching. And you know, like they say, focus only on your business and app logic, and that's what I'm striving for. So let's talk about my project, and enough saying bad things about the frameworks. Let's say some good things about the Vanilla Boot project. It's a non-pervasive, I'm talking about the guiding principles of the project. It is non-pervasive. It's not limiting how you write code, how you write your screens or your modules. You can do anything you can do with vanilla. There's nothing that you can do otherwise with vanilla JavaScript that you cannot do when you use Vanilla Boot. It has a minimalist approach, meaning you don't need to learn the guts of the framework to have full control of your app. It gives you the ability to create reusable components. And one of the features is that it downloads only the components that are being used. You can decide to preload some components if you want to cache them to have faster loading times. But basically, you might have an application with 100 screens, and the user is only using 2 or 3 of them. You don't want to download all the application. So that's one thing that the application does, that the Vanilla Boot does. It only downloads the components that you need. And I'm not sure that frameworks or the framework like React does it. It has this separation. Okay, there's no JSX. This is something that I really hated when I worked with React. And I'm not sure if Angular is using JSX as well or something like that, but standard HTML. So this on-click thing that you put inside the HTML, this is something you couldn't get away with if you use JSX, meaning the thing that looks like HTML when you develop in React, it's JSX, it's not HTML, but you want to use standard HTML. I like to use standard HTML, so I can use all those pretty cool little things like on-click or on mouse down or any kind of thing that you can do in native HTML. I want to preserve those functionality, those abilities. There's no reactivity, full control of rendering. Nothing happens, like we've seen in the example before of React, nothing happens without you explicitly making it happen. So there's no mystery things. Why does it happen? Why does the value reset? What's happening? There's nothing gets called behind the scene unless you make the call. So nothing is going to go unplanned, and then you're like, well, I have to read 100 pages document to see what happened. And there's a simple flow of data between the embedded components. I will show you an example real soon. And I've built an example that has a component, and then within it there are 2 components of the same type, and within each one of them there's a child component also of the same type, and they can all talk. They can all communicate, and it's pretty simple and intuitive. And there is free-form flow of data according to your needs. I don't limit you to a way to make this communication work. Free-form component architecture, no surprises, nothing to learn, no complex flow required for your code. Every component can be different, full flexibility. So this is something that I like to have when I get into building a very complex application, is that if I know, and I am doing it right now at work, I'm building an application that has about more than 150 screens, different kind of logic and complications. And I don't want to limit or to decide from the get-go, from the start of the project, how I'm going to build screens in general. I don't know. I might build 30 screens and then bump into a screen that's really, really complicated and has completely different element and needs a different flow. And Vanilla Boot lets you have like a world of its own in each component. There's no I don't know how to explain, but there's no they don't need to be like one another. Okay, so there's no virtual DOM, there's no built-in state management like we talked about. So you don't need to learn the framework's inner working. I know I'm repeating myself a little bit. The framework is written in short and simple code. There's no stratified object-oriented hell. It's about 370 lines of code. That's it. Right now, I mean, it's an early age. It's early stage library. It will grow, but I'm not putting a lot of code in it. I'm trying to keep it minimalist and easy. So even if you would need to look into it inside of the library, it's short, it's simple, and it's not built in too much of overly designed that you can't really tell, well, when does this code get called? By who? No transpiling, meaning when a code isn't transpiled, you can just press F12 and debug the code as it is written. So it's easier to investigate the code in the browser environment. There's no chunking to incoherent little pieces of code. And due to no framework as a base and fewer dependabilities, what did I write here? We get long-term reliability. So because this is such a small minimalist framework, and most of your code can eventually be even migrated to another library, or you can just move out and leave. You can migrate from Vanilla Boot really easily because the code that you write for your application is not built in a very specific way for Vanilla Boot. Vanilla Boot lets you build any way you want your code, your application logic. So you don't marry the framework. You can leave it or customize it, and you still have your code detached from any kind of logic that you would have if you would use, for example, I use this example because I think 90% of the market use React today. When you use React, you build the code around the structure of those React components. And your code is split, and the flow of data is how a React program expects it to be. And here, rather, it's more, you're free from this limitation, and you're not marrying the library. And I want you to keep using it, but I think it will be much easier to keep being independent. Okay, so you can create components, completely different strategy for each one of them. You can embed components in parent components and communicate between components. You can load multiple components again, meaning multiple instances of the same component. You can load dynamic JavaScript or CSS from any location. Let's move on. What about plugins and third-party stuff? Like I said before, there are plenty full of extensions available for vanilla JavaScript, equal or more than those available for frameworks. So here's an example of libraries that I like, and you can use with vanilla JavaScript, Van.js, which gives you actually the ability to create reactive UI elements without React. So you can actually use Van.js with Vanilla JS. Van.js is not mine, it's another project. You can create dynamically from code HTML elements like you would do with React. So you can add Van.js into Vanilla Boot and have all those reactivity abilities in one module in your system or in many modules. But you would not be limited to choose, okay, I want reactivity, so all my application has to be reactive. You can there's a project called Vanilla Router, which gives you the same routing mechanism that you have in frameworks like Angular and React. AgGrid, a great grid technology that I use a lot at work and for other projects. It's available for Vanilla. W2UI and Golden Layout, two very good technologies for building windowing systems in JavaScript, where you can have draggable windows that you can load your modules into. And I plan to support them in Vanilla Boot, so you can actually very easily write your own components that open inside those windows. You can integrate PayPal, Stripe, Moment.js, Day.js, and data visualization technology. So the idea that you need to use React or Angular because they have third-party libraries absolute nonsense. So let's get to the most important part, the example. Here's an example, and I will show it in a minute in the browser. What we see in this example is we see a root component, which is the whole big black box. And within it, there are two parent components, and each parent has two children. So there are three types of components here. There's the root, the parent, and the child. And there's concurrent instances, like we have two parents and two childs within each parent. And we have here an ordered loader of dependencies. So suppose one of your application windows needs to load many JavaScript, external JavaScript libraries, and you need them to load in a certain order, one before the other, and maybe you want to execute some custom JavaScript code after you load some library and before you load the next one. This is something that Vanilla Boots lets you do, and I show it in the example. Now, let me just switch window for a moment and show you the example in the browser. Okay, so this is the live example. Every time I reload it, it gets a random color. The random color comes from an external dependency. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole source code. It's not complicated at all. If you can get into the example is live on the website, and you can do a Control-U or F12 and get into the source and view how it's done and view how the components are loading. But the thing is, every child component has two buttons, call myself and call P2 C1. They all have call P2 parent 2 child 1. So if I call myself, it says I called myself. Call myself. Now if I go here and I say call P2 C1, it's going to say call from child 2. It should say call from child parent 1, child 2. Here it says, hi P1, I'm C1, or hi parent 1, I'm child 1, and then hi parent 1, I'm child 2. So we can see communication between the children and the parent, and children in completely different place in the tree. Let's go back to the presentation. So just I'll get a little bit into the example. So once you want to investigate it yourself, you know what's going on. The first, the HTML that you're loading, it's called example HTML. It loads the Vanilla Boot library. It has a div that takes all the width and the height of the screen. We call it example layout. And that's the div where inside everything is loaded. And that's the start of the example. It says, it starts the library and gives it the reference to the div where we want everything to happen. And then we say show module, and we pass the name of the module. It's called test grandparent. So basically, there's grandparent, parent, and child. And we want to first load a component called test grandparent. So what Vanilla Boot does is it goes to a library, to a folder called that name, test grandparent, and it looks for two things. This is the minimal module has an HTML file and a JavaScript file with the same name as the folder. And it loads the HTML, and it scans the HTML for divs that have class the class name Vanilla Boot component. Whenever there's a div with Vanilla Boot component as a class, it knows that it's a component that needs loading, and it has a name and an idea. And then we say, okay, the name is test parent, so we go to test parent and load test parent. Within test parent, you will have the same thing. You'll have a div with the class Vanilla Boot component and the name test child, and this is how the child is being loaded. Each component has a Vanilla Boot component as a prototype. So for example, here we have the child. This is the code for the child component. The constructor gets an element, an element in the HTML and a link to the parent, and it calls the superclass constructor, and then here we see the dynamic loading of dependencies. So we're loading a CSS file, and then we're loading a JavaScript, but right after the JavaScript is loaded, we have an event handler here, a function. This will be called after this dependency, sample dependency is loaded. And then we have the sample dependency 2 loaded. Now, if you go to the sources and you look what it does, sample dependency.js colors all of the children in one color. I think it's red or something. And then sample dependency 2 puts a random color to each child. So when the example is loading and you see a random color, you know that sample dependency 2 is the last JavaScript loaded. It's kind of like proving the ordering of the dependencies. And doStart is a function that is called for every component when all the dependencies finish to load. We are getting close to the end of the presentation. This is how communication between child and parent work. The component that has a link to the parent can simply call any method you choose to implement in the parent. So I call this method call from child, but this is any method that you would put in the parent component. You can access it directly. And then once you access it, the parent has the reference to the child instance. So the parent has a function called call from child, and it gets a reference to the child, and the text that we want to print. And then in the parent component, you can call a function that you create in the child called parent component will call this. It can be anything you put, anything, any functions you want to implement. But there is also a mechanism a utility mechanism that I provide called find component. So if you want to communicate between components without any regard for where they are placed, you just give it the hierarchy. So you say parent2 P2 C1. So it's the hierarchy of the idea of the components. So you just every component that loads, the library knows the structure, the tree of components that are loaded, and you can access them by just the name. Final thoughts. Vanilla Boot is currently only 370 lines of code. The code is sourced from existing complex and mature projects, which serve as repository for incremental dismantling and reuse. So basically, this is things that I've used when I built other projects, and I dismantled them and brought into Vanilla Boot to make them more general and universal, so other people can use the same mechanism. Process is carried out methodologically without haste, with each addition followed by careful observation of user adoption and identification of potential refactoring needs before further investigation. Right now, it's an early stage project, and I don't know where it's going to develop. We'll see who adopts the project and what feature requests I'm getting. There's certainly things that it cannot do right now. I mean, it's not ready to conquer the world, certainly. But for many users, for example, if like me, you are building an application that's going to be used inside an organization, and it's not going to be a website that's used by millions of concurrent users, and most of your applications, most of your pages will have one or two components, but you're going to have 100 or 150 or 200 screens, then it's perfect. It's perfect already. But if you're going to build a website and you're going to have like 50 components all loaded at once, you might want to think about how to pack the components together and not have it load create 50 or 100 HTTP requests for every component. So the framework is in early stage. It's not fit for any kind of use, but it can be used for most IT projects, especially ones that are not for public big websites. It's good. So is it too early to adopt? I would say no. Take it, adopt it. It's really easy and it gives you the ability to build in vanilla JavaScript. So thank you for your attention, and please visit the website and look at the example. Try to look at the source of it and download it and play with it. And I'm here for any questions, any support that's needed. It's open source. Use it in any way you want.
Well, thank you for your presentation. If there are any questions, then please ask those from the people who are here in the presentation. Please ask now. But as we didn't have any questions during the talk, so I guess people were satisfied with what you said and how you presented it. So thank you very much. And thanks for everyone who was here at the meeting. And if you watched the video and you enjoyed it, then please click on the like button and also follow the channel, definitely, so you'll get notified. Below the video, you will find links to where to find the project and how to get in touch with Eyal. And I think that's it for now. Any last words?
Thank you for the opportunity to present it. I am very excited about this project, and I think a lot of people will be very happy about it because it becomes hard today to be a vanilla JavaScript developer when everybody's using React.
Yeah, I don't use any of the frameworks, so I don't build big things, usually very lightweight, the JavaScript part, what I do. But then I usually either use vanilla JavaScript or maybe I use jQuery, but even that is not really necessarily in most cases. So thank you very much, and good luck with the project.
Thank you.
And bye-bye, everyone.
Ciao.